Hi, Cynthia. How are you? The first one here.
Yeah, I am.
All right. So hopefully everybody will be able to join us. So if you can take a look at the lab, and I will walk you through the lab. And when people join us, they'll catch up.
Okay. Professor,
Mm-hmm.
will you be available after class?
Yeah.
Okay. I just had a question regarding it's because we have our hackathon coming up, and I'm really sorry about not turning in the assignment. I'm actually trying to do um following this demo, and I'm trying to install Scapy the online the online interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could help me out.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Take a look at what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely. I'm surprised usually everybody shows, but they might be occupied with their own thing. Okay. So let's take a look at the lab. Your server and your UDP server. You can find the lab document here. Okay. So the first part, we are going to take a look at how to set up your HTTP server. I want you to kind of use the socket in a way where, you know, it makes sense to you. And so most of us know how to use the browser and be able to visit a website. So we are going to make our own system, an HTTP server, which is a web server, and it's fairly a simple script. So HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and this protocol is used on the browser to retrieve, in which it does the get a certain information from the web server. So when you have a web server, all that is it's just going to serving the website content to the user. And it allows the text and information to be displayed, sometimes interactive options for the user to click or enter some information. Now, when we learn to create socket, all that is a way for your OS to send and receive data right through the network to that server. So in the first exercise, what we are going to be doing is we are going to implement an HTTP server. And so when you take a look at this code, right, like what we talked about the whole week, we're using a socket module. So we import socket. Now the next part is you have to define what the server IP would be. We can use a loopback address, or simply if you use all.0, it will refer to that system. Okay. Now the port that we often see for web server is either 8000 or 8080. Sometimes you can also use 5000, but you can use any port number here. Now we want to use 8000 because it will be relevant to HTTP, where HTTP is 80, so it will be quickly for us to identify. So you would start out with defining what the server IP and the port would be, and that those two elements are really important for the socket. And as we understand how the network is established, right, it uses port number and IP address to really locate the system. So we would then have to define that in our script. Now, understanding how to set up an HTTP server as a script, it also gives you a better understanding on how people are attacking HTTP server, right? Now here is where we would create a socket. So we simply give it a name. You can use sock, you can use, so here we are using server underscore socket. And because this is a TCP traffic, we are going to use the socket.socket, and we are going to use the AF-INET and the sock stream. Okay. Now, in addition to that, we are going to establish, right, the reuse of the address and the option in the socket. So this just simply create a server socket for us. Then once you have a socket, just like what we talked about in the lecture, we are going to bind it. And the way you bind it, you have to bind it with an IP address and the port number. So however you identify the IP address and the port, that's what you're going to use in the parameter in the bind. You can also pass numbers in string. So when you're using an IP, you can do like 127.0.0.1, right? In quotation, right? So since we declared that already, notice that it's in the quotation. We simply use the variable that we had for the IP and the port, and we pass that in the parameter here. So once the server bind, we are going to have it listen, and you can specify like what we talked about, how many times. So the value here just indicates that it's going to listen 1. Now, as humans, we want to verify that it's happening. So we want to print out, right, what port it's listening on. So you can simply do a print with the listen port and the server port. And I made this so you can copy it in, but you can type it out if you wish. Then, because it is a live connection, we want to establish a while loop. And this while loop allows us to wait for the client. Okay. And so from the socket module, we can simply use client connection. So it's going to look for client connection, and it's going to look for client address. And using those things, it's going to accept. So your accept is going to be the client connection and address. Then after we have the client connection wait, we are going to obtain the request. And when we use HTTP, when it gets, right, it's going to first need to establish connection because it's TCP. HTTP is under TCP. Once the connection is established, then the request is going to come through as GET, and for GET, it will be GET HTTP 1.0. So to get the client request, we are going to have requests. And when we receive the client request, it's going to be in bytes. So if you're expecting, you know, a larger buffer size, you can specify that here. And so in this case, I'm using 1024. Okay. And this is in bytes. Okay. So that means it's 1 megabyte. So if you're expecting larger, you can put in like, you know, 2048 or 4096, etc. But we have to decode it. So you have to use a dot decode, because that way we can later convert it to other things like other encoding for other encoding system like UTF-8 and so on. Then we want to print the request, because if you don't decode, you won't be able to output it in text. Then after we have connection and request, we are going to respond from the server. So as it gets HTTP 1-0, we are going to respond with HTTP 1.0. And the code for HTTP as 200 is everything is good, right? Connection is established. Then if it's connected, we are going to send a hello, welcome to the server. Okay. Now, in the regular real world practice, here is where you serve the content, and later in the lab procedure, it actually shows you how you can serve the index file, the HTML file. That's what most users see when they visit a website. But we simply just output a string so that way we can test that our server works. Okay, so you're making your machine a web server, and then you're going to be a client connecting to it using the browser. So after that, we are going to have the client connection, and here we are going to send all the response, and we want to close the client connection. Now, if you don't close, it's just going to stay alive, right? And then lastly, we're going to close the server socket. So what I have is, I have a lot of test file here, so 1 second. In the first exercise, we're going to, this is the script from the lab, right? And so we would then first run it. So now our server is on, and you can leave it on. Then you're going to open up your browser. So let's say that I open up Edge. And I'm going, after I save and run the file for the server, I can type in HTTP/ localhost, and then the port number. Okay, so I should see, I don't know if you can, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. You should see the string, which is what we program, right? Hello, welcome to the server. So now my machine becomes the web server. And when the user visit that local host, right? So internal network, you should be able to do this. On your machine, you use localhost, but from another computer, you would use your computer IP address and then the port number to visit it. And that's how you can use socket to make your system an HTTP server. And this is the basic, right? So this script allows us to do that, I said that we are going to save it as a .py file and then run it. Then using your browser, you would visit your machine and that port. So that socket allows us to receive, right, the request from the browser, and it treats the browser, an application, as a client. Now we can use another machine as long as we put in the right IP address for the system. And if there's nothing filtering or blocking it, it should be able to go through. So from my browser, after I have opened that, I simply just take a screenshot showing that I'm able to see my web server. And there are many ways to be able to establish this, but since we are using socket module, I want to show you how you can create a socket to make a web server. Now we can also run tools and things as scripts on the web server. We learn how to be able to listen for ports, to list the IP addresses and so on, right? So all you have to do is to add in those scripts, right? In addition, or have those scripts as separate Python file or module, and then import those in and be able to run them. Any question with the first script, number 1? So we are going to take a screenshot. And as you notice that once it established a connection and served that request, it gives you the status as we told it to. Okay. So here you can see that it shows me, right? It's listening on port 8000 because that's in my script. It also responds to the get HTTP. And this part really tells you that it is the browser that you can use are cross-platform. So you can use Chromium, you can use, which is Chrome, right? You can use Microsoft Edge. You can use other, right? But in the case I'm on the Windows system, it shows me that it is the Windows platform. And my agents, I can use Firefox, I can use, you know, even when I'm on the Apple system, I can also use Safari and so on. So having this library or the module is definitely convenient. You don't have to write additional script just to handle this part, right? It's already been done for you. All you have to do is create a socket, bind the socket, make it listen, make it receive and send. And when you receive, that's in bytes. We have to decode it so we can see it in text. Otherwise, it won't give you that. Okay. Because there will be raw data. And that's just for socket. It's going to be similar in other protocol as well. So because HTTP umbrella under TCP, we would use sock stream and the AFINet, because we have to with the AFINet, we have to specify the IP and the host port. All right, so after we screenshot for one, I want you to look at your output for your server and identify the listening port. What is the connection status? Okay. What platform is shown on the Python shell? And that could be varied, right? Like if I'm on Microsoft Windows system, then it would show that. If you're on your Mac OS, then it will show that. It will be Apple. And for the connection status, if you look through your shell output, okay, it shows that it should keep alive at the beginning. Okay. Because that's why you implemented the while loop, so that way it would listen and wait and connect. Any question? And I wanted to move a little bit away from the book because, you know, you can run the example from the book and the notes, of course, but this gives you a little bit more understanding on how you can apply this realistically to a web server. Now for the second part, we're going to modify some things. What if we want our output to look a little different? Because it's HTTP, it will work with tags that we would use in HTML. Okay. So here it gives you the explanation that you use the server port which binds and listens to the request. So when the user submit the request, get HTTP 1.0 via the browser, right? That's how it's able to obtain the request from the client, which is from the browser. And so when we use print request, we can display the client status. So you can simply implement that one statement and that shows you, whether that client connects or not. Now, let's say that we want to add the tags header 1, which is H1, into that section, right, for the response. So when we add that, let me clear this. And let me open up a similar file. I edited it. So you can simply go to the section, right? And then just edit that part, this part right here. Just this line by adding the H1 right after the /n. So that's what I did with the number 6. I included the header 1 or the heading 1. And as you open the tag, you have to close it. Okay. HTML, open, you have to close. So what this will do is it's going to change my text, welcome to the server, hello, welcome to the server, to a larger font to treat it like a heading 1. Okay. So now what I will do is I will go ahead and run this file so you can edit it, save it again, and then run it. So now it's still going to listen because that's the main purpose of this for our web server. Then I'm going to reload this page. So now you can see that the font size has changed because the look and feel of it, right? It uses the heading now. So we can simply implement HTML tags to really display the text the way we want. But like I said, in the next part, we are going to implement the index file, which is your standard file and use that to display information to the user. So you can hard code it in that way, the string and the tags. So after you add the H1 to that, save. I forgot to mention that here. So we need to save and run the script, okay? After step 6. And then reopen your browser and then display the page again by loading this URL. then you're going to describe the difference. How does that look compared to what you've seen previously, right? So a web server won't do any good unless we have some HTML file, at least for a static page. So what I did was created this HTML file, and you can use your text editor, Notepad, or even your IDE text editor works. And you would type in. So when you look at this, all this is, you know, this is an HTML file. Here's your head, right? And then the title. So that's going to put it on the tab title. When you open that page, that top tab title is going to be CIS-30C test website. We're going to close the head. Then in the body, that's when you can display your content of your page. We can say, hello, welcome to CIS-30C test website. Welcome to the index HTML web page. And you can use different separate HTML file as separate pages. And so here's a link, and we can incorporate a link for them. And this is the minimal. So standard wise, when you visit a website, right, the page that's shown to you, that's the index file. And then you can also, use your HTML code and other, like even JavaScript, you can add in interaction and different things. So as I open the tag, I gotta close the tag, right? /. Now this is heading 1, so this is gonna be bigger in font. This is gonna, when you see a P, that's a paragraph. So that's in a separate paragraph. This is in a separate paragraph. Okay. And then after we have that, we are going to save it. So it would look like, let me open it. I don't think it's going to let me, but hold on. Index. Okay. So we want to save this as .html. So you're going to go File, Save As. And you can use your Python IDE to write it to save it as a write extension file. The important part is that make sure that it is all files, right? And then save it as a .html. And also you gotta make sure that it is in the same location or the folder as your script. Otherwise it doesn't work. So we know that most web server would have some form of HTML file, usually an index file. And then web server would have sockets. Okay. And so if you use Tawny to use, just make a new file, just make sure you save it as the right extension. So after we have created the HTML file, okay, we are going to go back to our server, the HTTP server Python file, and we're going to edit the highlighted section. Okay. So what you're going to do is you are going to remove, right, the heading that you added in earlier along with its string, and you want to define an object that's going to be opening file. And in Python, that's really easy. We're just going to do an object and then do an open method and then the file name. and it's going to read the content of that file. Okay. Then we're going to close that file. And then it continues with, for your response, you are going to include the content. So when it serves that to the user through the web browser, when a user uses the web browser and put in the URL, it's going to take the content and it's going to display that, okay, from that file. So this also shows you how to work with HTML file. So what I did was I edit, if you compare the previous, right, this section right here, okay, which is in the while true, in the while loop, and I modify that to this. And then that's like right before client connection and all. So I told it to read the HTML file and access the content. So now if we run this, right, it's gonna listen. We're gonna come back to the browser and we're gonna reload the page. Okay. So now you notice that it shows me index. So now it's reading that file. Okay. And I have a link for about page. So that's different than what we've seen previously with just using the string and the heading. Now we have an HTML file. So as you replace those lines, save and then rerun, right? And then reopen the browser and open up that page again, you will see the difference. Take a screen capture. And my question to you is, how does the browser output the different, how output differently should be than the prior output? Right? We told it to do different things now. We had asked it to, we instruct the system through the program by reading the index file instead of just displaying a string as header. So as we have a link in there, we can link it to another file. Okay. And so on the next step, it shows you how to do that. Do you have any question? Okay, so for 13, we're going to make a second HTML file. And you can use your IDE editor to do that, or any other editor. Text editor will be fine, like Notepad, Notepad++, Sublime, or the IDE text editor. Just save it as the about.html, the right file extension. So I'm going to go ahead and open this so you can see. Okay. So I have an about file. And on the title, I want to say about, and that's going to put it on the title here, right, for the browser. So when they click that link, it's going to open up that file, which is another page. And on the header, we just say about CIS-30C test site. This is a test web server built with Python sockets. Then as we use the tag, we're going to close those tags. So after we had, but make sure this file also sits with the Python script and the index, okay, in that same folder, of course. Now, after I have the about HTML, and I saved it, I would edit my Python script now. So we are going to replace the get content index HTML section, and we're going to put in how it's going to parse the header. Okay. So as we use socket module, we can incorporate a lot of these elements. And so this teaches you a little bit on how to really set up the server and work with the server, but there's a lot more to this, right? On the web development side, but as you can see, from a security standpoint, this is important to really know what happened, what is used to build it. So again, we are going to open and read the file, because even though it is a separate file, we have to make sure that it's that. So we want to read the index, and we also want to access, to link the about. So a lot of the things are very similar. There's slight changes in that. Okay. So you're going to modify this section, okay, with the highlighted. I think I also highlighted response, but it's the same. Close the first one. Let's open number 13. So as we run this, okay, the server is ready. We're going to reload the browser page. And now if we click about, sorry, I'm a little, it's laggy right now. Let's see if, oh, it's running into an error. Oh, I didn't define. Sorry, there's an error. Open file name. So that opens the index. Let's see. We're going to replace this with the about.html. Sorry, I had, so this one, instead of file name, where it would be so now it should be that. I don't want it to do it like that. I think I wanted to keep it as an index. I guess it just updates it, but I think there's a better way to link it. We should open it as an index and then link it out. But anyway, I'll fix that tonight. Okay. So now it updates that with the about. So you can, so ideally we should make this multiple pages, right? Different tabs, or even a link out, but you can see that it does update it when you modify the file name. So that's, I just do this because otherwise it's going to throw an error. I think we just have to write a condition for the link. Okay, so that was step 13. Then, so after you have updated that, okay, save, run, open browser, take a screen capture of your page like this. I have a bunch of stuff that might, so 1 second, let me get to, I should have checked that. 13, 19. Okay, so we're gonna modify this a little bit, take this out. Okay. This line, I'll highlight it. Make sure that it's just file name. Okay, so after we took the screenshot for 16, we're gonna come back to the script and we are going to handle error because you do sometimes, you know, web server might be unavailable or things are not connected right away, or have issues with 404 error issues. So we're gonna handle it with exception, as exception. So we will handle the exception for the 404 error. So in the server, the HTTP server Python file, right under the get client section, you are going to parse the header. And so that allows you to control, right, how the error can be handled. Then like the other one, we're gonna have it get the content and show the index. And we, instead of just having regular statement, we're gonna implement try and accept. So you would have try, open the file and read it. And sorry if I have something else there, and then close it. And if your response is okay, then you just serve the content. But in the case where it has exception, which is where file is not found, instead of just like stopping the program, we want it to respond to the user. So we want to show, right, if it's a 404, file is not found. Okay. Now, if you kept the code the way it was, right, it might throw an error. So here's my code. Just this line is a little different. So just leave it as file name, because it's going to look for that directory, and if you didn't really create that directory. Okay. So here, once I edit and add the try and accept, this section right under the if, above the client connection, that's why I edit for 19. And then I'm going to run. So it's going to open. I'm going to come back to my browser, replace it. So it handled the exception, file not found. So that's how we can implement exception handling in the case that comes across error. Any question? Okay, so make sure that's just file name. I think the other one, it should also, it might throw an error, but it should handle it as well. So after you check it with the browser, after you resave and run, you can describe the output. So what did it do to handle the exception, right? So it's gonna try to open a file, and if that file doesn't exist, it's gonna go to the accept part. But if that file exists, it's gonna read the file and use it as to display. Okay. Since that file didn't exist, it goes to the accept and it display file not found. So you get a little bit of the foundation by doing this, in that we see how we can implement files with web server, and then how to handle errors a little bit, right? And then how to add in additional files. You simply just, you can also use function. You can write method and then call the method, but this is just easy. Okay. And we want to emphasize the socket for different services or different protocols in this particular exercise, right? So this is the HTTP part, and then I want to move to the UDP part. As you saw a lot of example with TCP already, so we want to test UDP. And UDP is used by, lots of different servers and also appliances as well. So like, for example, if you run a DNS, it uses UDP. Okay, any questions regarding the HTTP exercise? So you have to modify as you go along, save, run, check with browser, okay? The next part is gonna be on UDP. And so here just gives you some general information about UDP. A client program sends a message packet to the destination server, and wherein the destination server also runs on UDP. So we gotta make sure that we establish the socket on the client and the UDP, okay? So that way it can send, receive on both sides. And as the picture illustrates. So for the underlying mechanism, it tells you here that the UDP involved no connection-based communication compared to TCP. That's different. There is no streaming of data between the server and the client. So when the client sent n number of packets to the server, it could also receive various number of distinct packets as replies from the server. So there's no guarantee, right? Since it is connectionless, it involves less compared to TCP. So when you create a socket, right, you make a socket, socket.socket using socket module. You next bind, then you set up receive and send, and you close. And it's simply that across. Okay, just like how we did the web server with TCP. And then on the client side, you make a socket, you bind it, you send, you receive, and you close. But it has to be the same type, right? You cannot have a UDP server and a TCP client, no. So they have to be the same socket type. Now, socket has been around for a long time. You will find a lot of example in Python 2 and some example in Python 3 and other languages as well. So, okay. Now the book, okay, if you did test the book, the server, it works. But the client, there's an error with the client. I know why, because they didn't encode it as an output. So the code that you see here, I've tested it multiple times, so it should work. So let's take a look at this. So we are going to import socket module. That's typical, right? Because we're going to make socket. We define an object sock, and this is going to be the socket. Okay. It is AF inet, so that's the family, but because it's UDP, we are going to use the sock diagram compared to stream because it's not streaming. Okay, it's a datagram. Just like the other one, we have to define the server port and IP. Okay. So instead of defining it, we can just use get host name. That will be just the host IP. And then the port, we can use an uncommon port for this one. Okay. So you have to define the port. Then we are going to output some stuff after we bind. Okay. So next step after creating a socket is the bind. And when you bind, you simply use two things, IP and port. Just like the other server. And you have a while loop. You want to show that it's doing something, so we're going to print waiting for client. And here we are going to receive data, and remember that this is buffer length, so it's byte size. And then we want to output receive messages, and we want to put down the data and the address from the client. So first we have to make the server, right? The UDP server script, save it. Don't run it yet, right? We should run them together. And then second, we are going to make the script for the client. And similar to the server, we're going to have a socket that's going to be UDP. So we're going to use sock diagram. We are going to use the host, which is the server address and port. Okay, it cannot be different. Then here we're going to declare a string that's going to be hello Python. Now we want to print out because we wanted to see, right, how that is connected. So we're going to print the host and the port number, the host IP and the port number. Now the client, it's simply going to send requests and receive, right? So we are going to send by using send to. Now the message, since you use a string here, if you do not encode in UTF-8, it will throw an error. So you have to encode. Okay. So that way you can see text. And with that, we're going to send to IP and port. So once it receives it, right, it would then respond. So you can add more element to this to make it, you know, a little bit more, have more feature. But we simply just wanted to test to see if it actually send and receive. That's it. Okay, so I wrote like 5 different versions of this because I wanted to add more things and then I ended up taking it out. So, but anyway, as you can see. All right, so let me see for the UDP. Oh, here. Okay, so the important elements, you saw that in the last exercise already, so you would see, but this one just UDP. Okay, so let me clear screen here, and then I'm gonna run this. And you can run this directly in command line if you're using Linux. Just, you know, make sure that you save it into a directory that you can access. Or if you're using like the virtual environment for Python, you can do that too. Okay. So it's my server is up. And then I'm going to open up the client now and I'm going to run it. Okay, and I'm going to run that. All right, so it tells me because it's host name, this is my computer name, and then the port number. So it's connected. Okay, that's it. I mean, UDP doesn't, you know, its service is really particular to certain things, like, you know, if you have appliances that connecting or a server like DNS is connecting. So, and we simply, our script is just designed to show that it's connecting, and that's it. So on the server side, right, it sends hello Python to the server. That's all it did. Question. Okay, so as you complete these two, I just want you to take a look at the program or the script and explain how the UDP client is connected to the server and how the server is responding to the client. What is it sending to the server and how the socket is established, you know, all that good stuff. Put it here. Okay. Take a screenshot as well. All right. Any question? So lab is fairly easy. We did a lot of the heavy lifting in our assignment. So you had some hands on there already. And then this is going to give you more of like a client server connection. And so just to use socket. keeping it light. Any question? Okay. So after we complete the lab, make sure that it gets to be submitted by Sunday. I did modify the gradebook settings. I found that, when I think your class doesn't get impacted, but I think the new Canvas gradebook, it automatically checks the assignment missing. It's going to give you a 0. Even if you submit the late assignment, it shows 0. So I disabled that for all my classes. But yeah, I'm working on grading today and tomorrow. So hopefully by tomorrow you would have everything updated for the week. As I do have 2 very large classes, 7 and 11, 50 students each. So I'm finishing 7 like when I get home tonight, and then work on your class and my 27. Okay, so I should have that ready. And then if you have any questions or any concern, you can also see me during office hours and email me. If we make a user interface with the server, is the user interface on the same port? Yes. So your front end, when you're making a user interface, the buttons and all of that stuff, it's still gonna be in that system, right? It's just a Pi module in that same location, and it's gonna be able to load. And I'm assuming that you're referring to the web server, right? So yeah, so you write the HTML file, the JavaScript, you can do it in JavaScript and save it as a .html. And then it just like the index file is still going to be the same. Now, in the case where if your user interface is going to controlling another system, then the function for that button, right, because it's event, when you click that button, it's just then connect via the port and the IP address for another system. So if I make like an interface where I can connect to a page that's on a different server, then that will be a different port. But since it's on the same server, it's still the same port. It's just all the files going to be stored at that location. And so when you look at the web server, like what can you find in the case where if you assess, you can look through, some of the directories on that web server. There's some content you can also find. You can traverse through the folder. You can, in some case, you can also find passwords and different things that they put on there, because all of these things, these elements are in, programming files, and so you can see through it. Okay, but for socket wise, it's still gonna go to that system, so it will be the port and the IP for that system. Other question? You're welcome. I'm still in PSC 16, so occasionally it turns. All right, I'm gonna stop recording, and then